Welcome to Alex and Annie, the Real Women of Vacation Rentals. I'm Alex.
I'm Annie.
And we are joined today with Jenny Hsieh, who is the Vice President of Homes and Villas by Marriott. Jenny, it is such a pleasure and honor to have you on the show today.
I'm excited to be here, ladies.
Thank you so much for indulging us. We've been a big fan of yours, and we got to see you last year at the women's conference, and you did a phenomenal job. And so we kind of put you in our Rolodex of people that we wanted to have on. So it's been a long time coming because you're a very, very busy woman.
There's a lot happening when you have a startup. And so I'm excited to finally be here and spend some time with you guys.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's probably a good way to start it. Let's look a little bit back at your history. If you can just tell our listeners about what your career has been. I know you've been in Marriott for a long time before Homes and Villas, but now it is more like a startup and a grown-up organization. But tell us a little bit about your past and how you've gotten to where you are now.
Yeah, really good question. Well, Marriott is the longest company tenure I've had at any company. So I've been at Marriott for 13 years. But maybe I'll go back a little bit further. And so very early on in my career, I was trying to figure out what is it that I wanted to do and wanted to be. And I worked in a small consulting firm for a little while and realized I loved business. I loved how things work. I loved people. And that prompted me to go to business school. After business school, I knew I wanted to learn as much as I could about everything. But my passion was really around customers. I really love thinking about why does a person choose what they choose? What drives people to make certain decisions? What makes them happy? What brings them joy? And all in the context of business. So I joined management consulting and I worked at Deloitte in strategy and operations for a few years. And then I made the move into Target Corporation. So for your US listeners, also known as Target. And I did work in strategy and innovation. And that was really when I was at Target, we were looking at really great questions. Because if you love thinking about customers, you love thinking about, okay, well, what makes this particular customer buy this type of bleach versus that type of bleach? Or what's a great strategy to get that mom with 2 young kids to come into our store and to stay in our stores? And the answer was fashion. And so we would think about problems like, should Target enter food and grocery? How do we create a beauty section that resonates for our diverse customers? And so I was really there thinking about ways to create new programs, ways to grow the business. And I loved that part of it. And so my husband works at the federal government. And while we were in Minneapolis, he had an opportunity to come back to the DC area. And I started looking the DC area to say, what are the customer focused companies there where I could take what I loved, which was thinking about people and helping them kind of, whether it's their day-to-day lives, improve it through what they buy at a retail store or something deeper. And Marriott came to the top of my list. It was one of the few hotel companies here at the time. This area has grown quite a bit for hospitality now with Hilton and Choice up here. But at the time, Marriott was really the biggest and best player. And so I remember going into Marriott and interviewing for a couple opportunities. And there was one in retail, doing work at that time, this is 13 years ago, retail stores within our hotels. And then there was another opportunity that was really interesting. And they were telling me at that time, it's a new division that we're starting. And we brought together the most creative people in the company. And it's going to be called Creative Operations. And I thought, that sounds weird because it's like an oxymoron, right?
Operations normally aren't really.
Exactly, Alex. That's what I thought too. And I thought this seems really interesting. But they were really interested in my experience in innovation and creating new programs at Target. And so I said, you know what, let me go there because that feels like I have the ability to grow and do many things within hotels, not just staying within a retail lane. And so I joined the team, and that team evolved over the course of, 13 years to become really focused on corporate innovation. In my last prior to leading Homes and Villas, I led the enterprise innovation function for the company. And we were really tasked with innovation, big, medium, and small. And I remember, my very early days there, we were doing everything from brainstorming names for our newest and latest brands. And so if anyone's a Bonvoy member, you'll know the autograph collection.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I think it was like my first month there. I sat in a room and they're like, we've got this new brand. Let's think of a name for it. And so we would start brainstorming it, to visioning what's the future of the meeting experience for the company. What should the future of wellness be? We just entered all inclusive. So my team led a lot of the experience design around what does that experience look like when you're at a Ritz-Carlton versus when you're at a Delta hotel. And, one of the innovations that emerged out of my time there was Homes and Villas. And so, being in the world of innovation, my job was to oftentimes look at the future. What is it that customers are doing? What are they buying? What's changing? And we saw the sharing economy really take off, right? I love telling this story. People used to say, I would tell them, like, the world's changed a lot. If you asked us 20 years ago, like, one of the biggest tenets that your mom told you, never get into a stranger's car. It's what we do all the time,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's such a good point.
I mean, things have completely changed. And so in innovation, we saw like the shift towards the sharing economy, this desire for like deeper, slower, longer travel and experiences. And we knew the growth was happening very early on. So this was like 2017 when we were beginning to do some deeper looks there. And that's when we began to see, hey, there's a growth. And there's a particular reason why at that time, over a quarter of our customers were leaving a Marriott property and instead going to rent a home. And so we began to develop new ideas and concepts. We had a travel incubator. One of the startups in it was a property management company.
Oh, wow.
And so we had an incubator. We did it with 1776 and Accenture. They were one of our finalists. We launched a pilot with them. And so when I was leading enterprise innovation, our job was to say, like, what's the newest, greatest, latest thing? What are consumers shifting towards that we need to be mindful of? And how do we test and create new things there? And so we did everything from Alexa and hotel rooms to chatbots, but this one held a pretty special place in my heart, which is like, how do we better respond to this growth and popularity around vacation rentals? And the sharing economy broadly. And we kind of defined, well, there's some things that we're not comfortable with. We're not comfortable with sharing a home with somebody who you don't know, right? And so in the very early stages when we were doing the concept, we were trying to think through, like, what is it that's in our core values at Marriott? Then what's the promise that we make to our customers just with a brand? It's a promise around trust. It's a promise around quality. Safety, security, all of those things. And then how do you enter a space like this in a way that still holds that promise true to our guests? Yeah. And so we came up with a concept with this startup, a really pilot. We called it Tribute Portfolio Homes. We launched it in 2018. I think we built it really fast. And we launched it in 2018 with them. We started in London. We expanded into a few other cities like Paris, Rome, and Portugal, and Lisbon in Portugal. And that worked really well. Like, it resonated for our customers. People loved the experience. We loved working with that property management company. And so then we made a pitch to make this it's no longer a pilot. Let's go from idea to a pilot to a business. Mm-hmm. And that's when we pitched Homes and Villas and got the approval, I think, December of 2018. In 6 really intense, crazy months, built it based off that pilot we had. And then we launched Homes and Villas in 2019. And so my journey in Marriott has been phenomenal. It's been really about thinking about customers, new products and experiences, new ideas, tests. And then I got the privilege to take this test and build a business out of it.
That's awesome.
So the Target thing, I have to go back to that because I'm
yeah.
I'm a Target.
You had Annie
me
at
too.
Target.
I love that company.
Thank you for what you did to make me want to shop there incessantly and go
Right.
in for one item, go in for one item and come out with a cart of stuff I don't need.
Yes.
Right.
My husband is
So
not going to
true.
like that I've met you now because yeah, you blame somebody. So I like what a great arc for your life. I mean, just so much stuff there. So when you did this startup and you pitched it, I mean, again, as Alex said, you're a startup within this giant, well-established organization.
Yep.
How did that evolve? And I mean, that had to be pretty daunting to go in and want to say, like, we need to start this whole little business that might be perceived as a conflict. Because I was that probably was at that time.
Oh my gosh, Annie, a really, really good question. So first, you can't go in there and be like, I think I want to start. You got to go in there like, we have to be in this business.
Right. Yeah, very confident with it.
I'm going to share with you data on why this is going to be relevant for us and right for our guests. And so I think, it's interesting because I do see a difference between entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I love about the vacation rental industry is it's so full of people like-minded with me, which is entrepreneurs, like people who like to start businesses, who evolve, who change, who pivot. I also earned probably with like 10 hard years of like learning how to create new things in a very operationally driven company. Yeah. And I learned lessons very early on, I think. And I had to learn those lessons to get an understanding of true operations in our hotel, an understanding of stakeholder preferences. I remember this really like fun and light and what I thought could be a really easy project early on in my career, where we were trying to make our hotels more family friendly and encourage more of the kids' stays, et cetera. And we said, hey, look, something really simple that we think the hotels can do is just, you guys should do like a milk, just like you do cocktail hour sometimes. There should be a milk and cookie hour, right?
Yeah.
For families right before bedtime, get the kids in.
Yeah.
How sweet is that, right?
Yeah.
And then I learned like early lessons because then someone turned around and they're like, sure, we could do that, but here's what you would need to do. Every cookie would have to be individually packaged and labeled.
Oh my gosh.
You would need to have a staff person there standing, distributing the cookies to make sure there was an adult and there weren't any food allergies. You would also have to install a refrigerator to hold the milk, which has to be individually, packaged and et cetera, right? And then I said, you know what? Forget it.
That's like why creative and operations don't normally go together.
Right, exactly.
The execution of it.
I had to learn very early on, like, here's kind of the complexity of this organization, and here's the complexity of rolling things out. And a lot of your listeners will feel and hear that as well, because people will come to you with ideas like, why don't you do this for your customers? And it's complicated to roll out at scale, right?
In theory, it sounds like something you'd want to do, but the execution of it can be very difficult.
And so I learned some very early lessons, and those were all helpful to me in actually pitching this, what I really think is a game-changing idea. And you can't pitch it in its fullest view all at once, right? We very early on kind of laid the groundwork for people to learn kind of the language of innovation, which is like, let's test, let's learn. Let's start small. So if we fail fast, and then we can learn and change and iterate. And so I started small. I started with an idea. I started with a pilot, and I started high, right? Yeah. And so, like Annie, you said it, which is like this idea felt really controversial to an industry that hadn't been in there before. And so, Stephanie Lennartz, who's our current president, and Arnie Sorensen, who was our fantastic CEO, they knew that they had to be a part of this. They had to really support the growth, the tests, and they knew that if you didn't have, for an idea this kind of controversial, different, it wasn't, it was just different, right? was easy when we were saying, hey, let's build a new brand. That's a hotel, and let's,
Yeah.
replicate what we've done. But this was really different. And so you start small, and then you recognize that if you have an idea that has some controversy around it, you make sure that the leadership is ready to stand behind it. And that takes time. Like, you have to build the case. You have to be able to give them data that says, 27% of our guests are leaving our portfolio to go rent homes. And then I always used to start my presentation with, how many of you have rented a home?
And how many people would answer that?
Oh, that number has changed materially.
Oh,
but
gosh,
you would see a good number of hands go up in the company. And that's pretty telling, because like, when you work with Marriott, you have the most amazing associate rates at our hotels.
Right. Yeah.
And so, like, it's not a financial choice, right? Because financially, you probably would do better renting like 3 rooms, right? And so it was a product choice. Like, it was a choice when I asked people, well, why did you rent a home? And the answer is always, well, we had a big group. We wanted to spend time together.
Yeah, situational.
It was a family reunion. We call it trip purpose.
Yeah.
And so you have to make a really good case, and then you do a little prayer. It's like, you've got to do everything you can do to be ready for it, but then you also have to have a little bit of luck on your side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the heart of all of this comes down to the brand. And obviously Marriott has done an incredible job. And I think you touched on earlier when you were trying to think of what brands you would want to work for, and Marriott came to mind. I can understand that feeling, because Marriott really is just, in my mind, is just such a respected company. And I've read so much about Bill Marriott and Arnie Sorensen, and just the leadership team and how they've built the business. It's very intriguing to me. And I think how they've expanded into these multiple different hotel brands has been really interesting. That there are so many times now that I travel that I book something, and then I don't even realize it's Marriott until I get there, because it's Moxie or there's so many different versions now that it's really interesting. But the way that you've tied it together, I think it makes a lot of sense. And it makes sense why you brought Homes and Villas into that whole family of brands, because people that love Marriott, they want to book with Marriott. And if you don't give them those options, you have the potential of losing that customer, right? So it's really listening to your customers, what they're asking for, and knowing that, bookings are situational. My husband and I, when we travel, we'd mostly stay in hotels because it's just the two of us. But if we're going somewhere with a group of friends, then we'll book, a cabin or a beach home. So having those options and making it easy, especially through your rewards program, it brings all of it full circle. But I'm sure that the early days were a little bit chaotic, and I think, to say the least, right?
That's to say the least.
Yeah.
There were some long nights and a lot of technology glitches, but we got there.
Yeah. And the technology, we'll get to that in a second too, because that's a whole nother whirlwind. But from the outside, it seems like the biggest difference between the two, there's a lot of similarities to, Marriott is essentially a franchise model company. You don't own these hotels, are very, very few of them, right? There's
just
only
a handful.
Yeah. So
less than a dozen.
It's a similar concept, but the main difference is that if you're looking at a property management company, they're kind of like one of your franchises, but the difference is that you don't have full control over it, right? So you are part of their distribution, which is different than a franchise where, you really have oversight onto pretty much every part of the business. But that would be kind of my next segment, is what was that process like, learning how you're going to bring property managers into the ecosystem, and just what were the biggest surprises when you started having those conversations and pulling the properties in? And I know there's been a lot of revelations, but like how did that process go?
Well, one of the things which I love, Alex, is you really understood the nuance of our business model, which is different than any other competitor out there, right? We only work with professional property management companies.
Right.
That is our differentiator. It's our position. It is how we see success. And we did build that model off of what we do with our franchisees, right? And so in some ways, this idea that we had, which is at its heart, Like we build the brand, we build the channels, we have the customer base, and then we build the standards. These are the things we expect our partners to do. And then we go out and find the best partners in the world to be able to do that. And they work with us and we grow together. Now, one of the things you said, which I was like, ooh, that would be so nice, which is like our hotel franchisees, we have full control over. Not the case.
Oh, you don't? Okay. In theory.
Not the case in theory, right?
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
But what is true though is like they fly a hard flag. That is like it's the Aloft or it's the Residence Inn or it's the Westin, whatever that may be. Whereas in this model, so we have a similar model, which is our job is to, and we're in the marketplace very intentionally as a hospitality company, which is very different than our competitors who are tech companies. And as a tech company, their promise is like, we're going to create a marketplace that brings demand and supply together. And we're going to do our best in kind of facilitating with that, with the technology. That's not our position. Our position is we're going to curate the best homes and the best partners from a professional property management perspective to support you for a great stay for our guests, right? And we're going to curate that. And so we go through kind of the process of trying to find kind of best partners. And it is, while we take inspiration from our franchise model, I'd say like the model that we have in Homes and Villas is a much lighter version of it, right? Yeah. Our franchise agreements are hundreds of pages long. Our standards are fairly exhaustive, right? And so, and what's so funny is I laugh and I say, even though we know it's a light version relative to the industry, it may still feel like heavy. So you're just kind of sitting in the middle of, in some ways. And so we have a model where we believe strongly that professional property managers really are fantastic in the work they do. And I spent a lot of time during the early phases of our pilot, before the pilot, doing the research, spending time with property managers, walking the houses, following on operations, looking at the back of the house. How do you manage keys? How do you manage linen deployment? And I think one of the things that we recognized early on is it is not the same as running a hotel.
No,
and,
it's not.
It is completely different. And so it is one thing to have, I often talk about it, and I still think the same thing applies for us, right? In a good hotel, housekeeping is the backbone of the hotel. Yeah. If you don't have really great housekeeping, you have nothing. Everything kind of falls apart around it.
You can have great marketing, but if you don't have people that are doing the operations and the housekeeping, you have nothing.
Yeah. Cleanliness is like king, right? Yeah. And so we have that same principle, and I would watch our partners. And so this is why my background on studying people and customers and loving to see how things work. We spent a lot of time with our partners, watching the day-to-day, learning and seeing their expertise. And we appreciated the fact that it is not at all like what hotels do. Like in hotels, sometimes you have a housekeeping staff who's phenomenal and they've been at your hotel for a dozen years and they've cleaned that same room for a dozen years. And you got, linen getting deployed all within a stack in that building. It's a very different proposition when you've got, dozens of homes across Myrtle Beach. And those homes are like 10 plus bedrooms, and you need to deploy a team, and then you need to get linens and you need to get equipment from place to place. And so I think one of the things that was very like true to kind of how we think about innovation and creating new things is we got very tight with our professional property management partners. We watched, we toured, we observed, we spent time, and we saw that was quite different. And then we adjusted our expectations. Right. And we said, there are some things for which Marriott brings a lot of expertise, and that is around brands and building standards and ensuring safety and understanding our customer. But then there are other things that we think our property manager partners are much better at. They bring the history and the expertise, and that's the model that we're going to do. And we frankly need to celebrate the ones who do it really well. Yeah. Elevate the ones we think are really close, but not quite there yet. And then, recognize that there are going to be some partners that we won't ever work with. And that's okay, because, there's a match for every type of product. And so when we started working with those partners and sharing kind of insights, I think, the biggest ahas and the early ahas was how different some elements of that business is and how we needed to make adjustments to really accommodate those. Like when you get to a hotel and you want to check in early or check out late.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not that hard,
do that.
right?
Right. Yeah.
Can't do that when it comes to homes,
No.
and we can't force that, right?
Yeah.
We can't say, hey, I've got a titanium member and they want to check in early. Doesn't work.
I
right,
wish
when it
we
comes
could
to
offer
home.
those things easily or more easily, because gosh, we get FOMO reading all the articles about how we can, better use upsells and things of that nature, but it's really not as executable within vacation rentals as it is in hotels. And
That's
especially, right. I mean, a lot of the destinations that you're in, those are Saturday turn day locations. So it's on Saturdays in the summer, we're turning 500 condos. So, the operations that goes behind that is really, it's quite incredible. But I really think you hit it on the mark that it's the experience that has built property managers over the years by trying and failing and getting, sometimes our processes, they might seem from the outside that they're not, the perfect standards, but really they get the job done. And it's every company does things differently. That's the really hard part too. Yeah, and just because one company does it differently doesn't mean that it could still be delivering the same level of service, but it's just how it's been built behind it could be different versus hotels. There's so much more that is standard on the back end of how it operates. We'll be back in just a minute after word from our premier brand sponsor, Costco.
I've done every position in this company. I mean, started from the ground up. I was done right. I just did everything. So I've done it all. Not to say that I don't still enjoy vacuuming. I love that. You get burned out a little bit. And you lose your, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
That's Kelly Hill, Costco's franchisee from McCall, Idaho. Her company, Done Right Management, had been a leader in the market for many years, but as larger national companies started to gain ground, Kelly felt like she was losing control of the business.
I was my way out the door before Costco came. I really was. I think I was considering selling the company because I was at that point where I was getting like, maybe this isn't for me. Ryan and Steve approached me, and it was like they sang a song to me because I was like, this is what I need. I need direction. I'm looking at the bigger companies and I'll say, Vicasa's out there and I admire them for a lot that they do. They have a lot of bandwidth here. They have, bulk. And so they can do things a lot cheaper and their systems are great. And I looked at Costco as the opportunity that we needed to get there, to have some of those advantages.
We asked Kelly about the transition to becoming part of Costco and her thoughts on the benefits of becoming part of their franchise model.
We had just switched to a different PMS system that same year. So it was a real challenging year, but it was so worth it because Streamline is just, it's the best of breed. And I love touting that. When I meet with owners, I'm like, we use Streamline software. It's the best in the industry. That's the one main thing, is that the training and the support that they've given us. They are just there. Anything we need.
Kelly's story is one that resonates with many of our franchisees. Switching software is a big decision. Costco's full-time support staff are here to help make this process significantly easier and more efficient than a regular software switch.
Ryan and Steve, they just really said, you can still do this. We're here for you. And if we have all these things in place, your company can run smoothly, and it does. And I think that I can take off for a week, and I know I'm going to come back and everything is running as good, if not better, than when I was here. So it's great.
Visit Costco.com/franchise to hear more stories from franchisees like Kelly and inquire about territory opportunities and available markets.
Well, and that's part of, like, if you think about what we call our select service hotels, like the Residence Inns, the Courtyards, those are prototypes. They're the same product replicated in many parts of the world. Whereas, we are like snowflakes. Every house is different. And, it is like sometimes, you can't, like, it's really great when you have a housekeeping team that knows a home. right?
Yeah.
And is consistent with that home, because they will know that cobwebs tend to collect and leaves
Yeah.
tend to collect in this corner of the balcony that looks terrible when the guest gets there. So I'm going to make sure that's taken care of, right? And so, yeah, so different. But, on the balance, we also hear from our property management companies, like they still want to learn. They know we have 95 years of hospitality
Oh,
experience.
definitely. Yeah.
And there are things that, we have done over the past few years. Like we have a deep relationship with Eco Lab. So we did, right when COVID happened, a big educational workshop on like, what does it mean to clean in the age of COVID? And what are
Right.
the
Yeah.
right type of
Yeah.
chemicals and what's the right
Yeah.
method? We've had classes or sessions that we've done with specific property managers. When they get some cleanliness challenges on scorers, we can support them with like a housekeeping kind of refresh. And we get experts in that tell you, like, for your housekeeping team, here's the path that is the most efficient for how they go about and clean a house. And so those partners can take those tips and apply them, or choose to say, you know what, that's a really good tip, but it doesn't necessarily fit. Our job is to kind of share the information and hopefully elevate the way our partners operate.
One thing I think that would be really interesting, and I had worked at a Marriott resort years ago when in my hotel days in the 90s. And one of the things I loved about working for Marriott was the training that we got, like the customer service training and the sales training and all the different aspects of it. And it would be really great if that was something that you could offer, because I know that you talk to property managers and everybody has a hard time retaining staff. But I think it's also about training that staff and training them efficiently and understanding the various ways to train them. And I think that they just get so mired in the details of running the business that that's something that they maybe they want to do, but they don't focus on or have the time to do it. So your partners can probably access, some of that. Marriott is just like the best at those skill sets.
And we have, like, this is the beauty of being, like, there are pros and cons to being part of a big enterprise. Cons are sometimes things move a little slower, but pros are we have world-class experts. And so we have world-class experts at building interactive training. And, we have world-class experts at service. I mean, for goodness sakes, we have the Ritz-Carlton, right? And they have a full institute on how you deliver service. And so one of the things that we are often thinking about, and we're not quite there yet, right? These are all the opportunities that we have, is how do we bring more service-driven courses and make those available? Because we know there's some truths in hospitality service that we have that I don't think are quite as in place within the vacation rental industry, right? And so it's this notion, like, we know from being in hotels that when something goes wrong, service recovery is critical. And that when you recover that error, that customer will give you a higher score than if they had not had that problem. And so we know the value of service recovery. But I don't know that in the vacation rental industry that we're quite there yet, right? Because when something goes wrong, it's like, oh my goodness, I got to get such and such out and, do X, Y, and Z. And it's just, I think some of it's like logistics, it's operations, it's staffing model, but there are things that are truths that I think are truths across industry, and service recovery and how you care for your customers, I think, is a big one.
As spot on. Yeah. I in our business, at least, I can say the exact same thing, that honestly, some of the best reviews that I read are something that went wrong and how we handled it. And that's a really good way to look at it, especially in today's day and age where a lot of guests don't check in at your office anymore. So unless something goes wrong, it's almost like it's like a blessing in disguise when something goes wrong, because it gives you that opportunity to fix it. But I think overall, there seems to me just to be a really big opportunity for Marriott to help our whole industry from the communication and the conversation standpoint of, how do we learn from you? How do we work together? I mean, I think it's when you came in, I remember when you presented in New Orleans in 2019, I think that was like the official launch, right?
That was the official launch.
You did a great job. I remember watching that presentation being like, gosh, they have nailed it with this. Like, there's just so much that makes sense about it. But I think our industry has been pretty welcoming to what you've put together and knowing that there's a lot of value. There's a lot of value for companies to say to their homeowners that they're partners with Marriott. I mean, that's like, oh boy, because they can't do that on their own, right?
No, and
So,
there's so
that's a big
many. I
thing.
can't tell you how many times I get a Bonvoy customer who is so excited. They're like, "My house made it on your platform," or
Yeah,
"I have a
yeah.
brother who has a house in Myrtle
Yeah.
Beach and they're on," and so they
Yeah.
want to figure out if they can get a picture with a logo. And I'll be like,
Yeah.
"How is
Yeah.
it true?" But I mean, it is fantastic, and that's because like people are proud. It's the brand that we built.
Yeah,
As
it
a
is. It's the
company.
standards. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I have a
For
friend
sure.
that travels. She works for a government contractor, so she travels constantly, and so she's accruing her Bonvoy points all over the place. And when the company Lexicon that I work for, we're a channel manager. When we started working with Marriott, she was like, "Okay, so can you help me find a place? Am I allowed to use my points? How does this work?" And
Right. Yeah.
so
Exactly.
It really
Yeah.
became a game changer for her, because there are some trips where she, before her daughter went to college, she took her daughter on some trips together so they could just, experience these towns like Arizona, like Sedona and those type of things. And she was like, "It'd be so great if I could bring my whole family on these trips in the summer." And so they've done some of that now where she's been able to take her whole family to be able to rent, because otherwise they would have
yeah.
got twin boys and a girl and multiple
do
boys. Logistically, it's just hard to do all that. So it was a game changer for her, and just the surprise and delight every time that she was able to use those points and accrue points. It's just such a great win.
That's so good. I love that. It reminds me of the story when I actually felt like I made it. And so I was at home, and I think like our cable had gone down or something. And this was just a couple of years ago. We were like a few months past the pandemic. And so maybe Homes and Villas was maybe a year and a half old. And I had a female cable kind of repair person come in. And she and I were just chatting, and she's like, "Oh, you work at Marriott?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I work at Marriott." She's like, "You would not believe, I had the most awesome experience. Like, my son and I were going to do a trip away to Vegas at one of your hotels, but then the pandemic hit and we weren't really comfortable. And they have this amazing new product called Homes and Villas. And so I took my points and I used that,
I love that
to book that home. And so she didn't know what I did at Marriott. And
yeah.
I was
like, that's me.
I was like, "How did you like it?" And I prayed. And she's like, "It was great." And then, but I never told her what I did. But like, that was when I felt like I made it as a business. Like when my cable woman came and was like, there was this awesome product that Marriott's offering. And now I was like, oh my gosh.
Well, it validated what you wanted to do. And that
That's right.
Yeah. And
that's great.
So one of the themes that we talk about a lot is just, the overall brand of the professionally managed vacation rental industry, and how we have just been kind of grouped into Airbnb, just whether you're professionally managed or not, and the implications that that's had. Trying to be proactive and positive on how we reframe that opinion and just the story of what we tell. How can Marriott help with that? How can we figure out a way that Marriott's a big brand too, right?
Yeah.
And obviously Airbnb is huge, but you guys, if anybody can help us in a way that is, mutually beneficial, I feel like it would be a Marriott. But do you have any thoughts on how we brand the industry, since you guys are so good at it, and make it into its own thing?
Yeah, I think it goes a little bit back to kind of the core identity. My identity in Homes and Villas this is a hospitality business. At the end of the day, it's not a tech business. Right. Yeah. And I think the vacation rental industry and its heart is really about hospitality. It's about caring for your guests and taking care of people when they're on probably a vacation they've been saving up for many years. Right. And it's probably a really important vacation. And so I do think that there is a lot of value in making sure that you continue to think about hospitality at the forefront. And there's a lot of hype these days, sometimes, like with tech and growth and scale and all of those things that become important, and has made the vacation rental industry kind of, short-term rentals is the fastest growing sector within the accommodations, right? And it's easy for kind of the media and the analysts to think about it as, all these tech startups, and you're going to suddenly come up with an app where nobody ever.
Yeah, exactly.
And
right.
you can scale to 1 million.
I haven't
right?
seen it happen yet, but it sounds good in theory.
And so I think that gets sometimes distracting from the core of what the industry really needs to be about. And that is about taking care of guests in a way that is consistent, reliable, human, right? And so I think, like, if anything, that's what I would encourage the industry or the collective of us to say, like, this is what we're about. We're about hospitality. We're not about the tech that just exists. Like, at the end of the day, these are humans. These are people's homes that they're going to great experiences for you. So that's what I would encourage.
Yeah. And I feel like there's such an opportunity there, because you touched on it earlier. I mean, it looks like it's easier, or it's easy to come in and put an app in place that can eliminate the people there. And I think there's a lot of the investors and the new people that are getting into this new thing called short-term rentals, which we know it's not new. And they are just assuming, okay, we can go in and we can streamline processes by using technology that these mom and pops have not been doing. And so inherently that's going to make a better guest experience. But I doubt that really has not come to fruition in the same way that we're all able to deliver hospitality. And I think that's where, with Marriott's background as a hospitality company, these are the conversations we need to be having to really make that click.
Those folks who are saying that probably haven't been stuck outside at home.
Right, exactly.
And the Wi-Fi's down, right?
And
so, you're in a really tough place if you can't get in touch with anybody to say, because like things like that happen all the time. But if you don't have like a lifeline to say, hey, look, to the property management company, I need some help. Or sometimes if they can't reach the property management company, they reach us. And so at Homes and Villas, like, our customers know that we're there as a safety net. And so things aren't always flawless. We try and design it, and we have great partners who try and get there, but stuff happens. And that's why we're here to help in terms of just, catching folks when something unexpected happens.
Yeah.
So in that, in not being perfect, but you're as close to perfect as we could possibly imagine somebody coming in this is doing, not being in it for a very long time. What do you think are like some of the opportunities and maybe struggles and challenges that you've had in building homes and villas? Not only just, again, a complementary style business within a business, a woman presenting this business in hospitality is a fairly male-dominated industry.
It is a male-dominated industry. So, I mean, I think, what's interesting when you come into this space is from a business perspective, and you all, I'm sure, have been in companies that feel this way. Like, people want to know if you're going to succeed and what your long-term plan is at the gate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right? Exactly.
It's just hard to answer.
Sometimes their long-term plan is making it till tomorrow.
Correct, right? And so I often talk about, like, I'm a toddler. I'm a 3.5-year-old. And I've changed a lot in the last 3.5 years. And I've done it hopefully for the better, because I've learned from great partners out there. And so I think one of the challenges is, like, we came in and we grew fast because we knew when we started, we had 2,000 homes. That's not enough.
Right.
And we had millions of customers all over the world, right? And they're like, okay, I want to go to, Port Aransas, which we didn't have a hotel in Port Aransas, but we had a lot of Texans who are part of our members. And if we only had like 20 homes in Port Aransas, and you wanted to go during like a peak season when kids were out of school and you wanted a pool, you weren't having. So, like, we quickly learned, okay, 2,000 is not enough. And so we got to grow to be able to respond to our customers' needs and be in places where they want to go, and then enough depth. And I think that was a real fast lesson we learned, right? And then we quickly said, all right, like, our technology is not at the level that we need it to be. We need to broaden our opportunities and begin to scale. And so I think we took that as the second opportunity and said, okay, how do we not only grow supply, which is the homes we have in the right places, but also make our technology better to make that growth a little bit easier. We continue to grow. We're a global business. We just launched some pretty stunning homes in Kuala Lumpur and the Netherlands. And,
Wow.
you know, I want to be able to, like, whether you're a US citizen that wants to go over to Asia Pacific or to Europe, or for a European who wants to come to the US, I want to be able to be in all the places that you're at, that you want to go to. And so that's a big opportunity for us. And I think the other big opportunity is with growth and fast growth is we always have to continue to monitor the quality component, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our business got built on 3 big insights and pain points that customers told us. Customers came to us and they said, hey, look, I want a home, but every time I search, thousands of things come back and I can't figure out what's good and what's not good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why we curate. And then the second thing they said is like, and when I do book these homes, I'm booking on behalf of a bunch of friends from college or my extended family. And if I mess up and we arrive at that home and it doesn't look like what the picture said, they're all going to look at me.
Absolutely.
As the person.
It's a big role. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the third thing was like, they were telling us, look, I'm afraid that when something goes wrong and I'm at the home, there's no one that's going to help me because the person I rented it from is now at a ski trip and unavailable.
Yeah.
Right. And so we built that business on those 3 insights. We need to make sure as we continue to grow the business in terms of scale that we are still staying true to those customer insights, like those promises that we make to solve pain points for our guests, continue to kind of be true in our business. Otherwise, it's, you know, you lose your purpose.
Right.
And so that is the big thing. I think the other thing, like being a woman in this industry is definitely different, you know, and being in the hospitality industry is one thing. Going into a new industry like short-term rentals, that's pretty kind of, it's a small world. Like everybody knows everybody else.
It really is.
And so, you know, it's interesting. You have to be confident in what you stand for and your values. And recognize that, you know, there may be folks out there sometimes, and I conflate the two, but I don't necessarily think that they're totally different, that may say, I don't know if she knows totally what she's talking about, or does she really understand the industry? And so I get challenged to like, do those questions get posed to male leaders who enter an industry?
Right.
Yeah. And so I think, you know, really understanding who you are, what your values are, what your business is about, what you hold firm, I think is important. I think really being collaborative, understanding that just because we're Marriott doesn't mean we're the smartest folks in the room. It means like you've got great partners out there. Let's listen to them and let's understand. And so I think it's a balance of both of those. You have to go in confident and understand your values and be sure of kind of what you stand for and what your business means and what's kind of your North Star. Yeah. And then also being really humble and understanding like, this is an area that we're learning and growing and we're continuing to refine as we go. So I try and navigate using both of those. And I think that's being a woman
well together
is definitely it's different. You know.
Well, I think Marriott has done a really great job of being that vulnerable and being honest and humble about things that I don't think when you came in, it seemed like you were saying you knew everything about this and you had been planning this and plotting for years that this was going to, you know, take over the whole industry. But I think you've made changes to the program, you know, throughout the years, and that's been based on the feedback that you've gotten from property managers, which that shows, you know, the intent and the willingness to work with all of us. Because I mean, at the end of the day, you've made it clear Marriott's not going to go out and buy a bunch of homes. So if you want the product, you have to be able to work with the people that are cultivating that product and build those relationships that are mutually beneficial. So I think your approach to it is excellent. But you're an incredibly inspiring leader. And one other question I wanted to ask was, I mean, before Target, and what got you? How did you even get there? I mean, like, what did you have role models or mentors along your journey that have pushed you and motivated you?
It's been interesting. I've had the most eclectic set of role models in the world, right? Like my very first one is this tiny British MD PhD man who like focused on quality. And he's the one that like taught me the fundamentals of like great process, great systems, great structure.
Yeah, love it.
And then as I got through kind of my career, I've had many women leaders who I look to who, I watch everyone's style, and at every job I pick up like, here are the 2 or 3 things that I love that this person does and that I really want to bring into kind of my ethos. I've often chosen jobs for people, the leader.
Mhm.
I choose to go based on where I think there's somebody that I can learn from.
Yeah.
My path to this role and this life, has been very wiggly. When I was in college, I studied biology and art history, neither of which are
not relevant now,
relevant to what I do today.
That's
other
funny.
than my just personal passions. But I think there is something about just really like when you look at people get so caught up sometimes in what I call the corporate ladder or the career ladder. Like, how do I get from manager to senior manager to director and then keep going up? I didn't get so wrapped up about it. I really thought about, now, absolutely, am I ambitious? Yes. Am I ambitious about what I can do and what my business can do and what our company can do for our guests? Yes. But I wasn't very focused on being an expert in one thing and getting up that ladder really fast. I kind of took the time to say, like, what do I love doing? What brings me joy? And then how do I bring together a team of people who have the same values, who care about customers, who care about our guests, who care about partners? And how do I build an ecosystem? Because life's too short to not love your job and not love the people that you work with. And so,
totally agree.
The goal is to get to a position where you can like create that for yourself or be a part of that. And so in my career choice, I've often thought about like, do I love what I'm doing every day? Do I find purpose in it? Do I love the people I'm working for? And can I learn from that particular leader? And so that's just what guides me. And then I took a really wiggly path, but it's worked out well.
That's perfect, wonderful advice. I mean, people and purpose, that's what it really comes down to. But
Alex and
awesome.
I've talked a lot about the signs, like you just recognize the signs along the way that kind of lead you down the path, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a straight path to get you where you are.
Oh, right.
And it's the benefit of hindsight that you realize all of those pieces were put in your path for exactly the reason that you needed them now.
Yeah,
so
you can't connect the dots until you're looking back.
Until it's later.
That's totally right.
What would you tell your, I think I saw that you went to University of Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
Did you grow up in Virginia?
I did. I'm a double who. I went to
UVA
twice.
Twice.
I grew up in Virginia, and so I have a lot of friends that went to UVA. And and I will say that all the girls that came out of UVA, very driven, very passionate, very amazing, all amazing women. So whatever they taught you,
it's a great school for sure.
The water they put in there, but it's really good. I mean, and then Annie, what you said, I mean, that's one thing I would tell people, like, as you look at other like junior female leaders that are coming up, sometimes when you're in the woods, you can't see the forest from the trees. You can't connect the dots. And that's when a really good mentor is there to help you to say, all right, take a step back and let's think about like what makes you happy, what has the highest growth potential. And those are the types of things that I think are really important, not just for other female leaders, but all the people who
all leaders and all people. Yeah.
Step back and kind of help people connect the dots for them, because, I'm fortunate to have had the wisdom of lots of wiggly paths and things where I've like done things that I retrospectively, that probably wasn't like time well spent. And then other things were just like, wow, that really worked out. Yeah.
That catapulted you to where you are.
It all made you who you are and the great leader that you are. And so you've helped us connect a lot of dots to you and to Marriott and your experience. And we can't thank you enough for your time. And we know you're very busy and you've got a lot going on. And I believe we will see you soon in Vegas at the VRMA
Yes,
conference.
Yeah.
Super
absolutely.
excited about that.
that's
But if
great.
anybody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you?
Reach me on LinkedIn, or
Okay.
you can feel free to always email me. It's jennifer.hsieh@marriott.com.
Perfect.
Great. We will include that in the show notes. And if anybody wants to contact Annie and I, you can go to alexandanniepodcast.com. And Jenny, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. And we look forward to seeing you next month, just in a couple of weeks, actually, at VRMA. So thank you
Sounds
again.
good. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you
Yeah.
both.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. And we'll talk to you next time.